Thanks for checking out the I Am More Than podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Wessel, a former Miss Arizona USA, professional model, self-acceptance advocate, hype girl, and founder of More Than Inc. In this podcast, we talk about the things that actually matter, from mental health to health and wellness, body image and confidence, and social issues. We're here to uplift, educate, inspire, and grow together. Each week, we'll feature a unique and incredible woman to share her story of how she's so much more than whatever you may know her as. We'll laugh, cry, and feel inspired in every episode, and trust me, there's no topic off limits. Whether you're commuting, working, or enjoying a glass of wine, we're so honored to have you here, and I'm excited to welcome you to the More Than movement. We're just getting started. This episode comes with a trigger warning, as we'll be discussing sensitive topics surrounding the mental, emotional, and physical impact of sexual assault. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and unfortunately, there are way too many members of this community. Approximately 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men experience sexual violence in their lifetime. As a company, it's vital that we not only bring awareness, but if you're listening and part of this community, we want you to know you're not alone. If you haven't been personally affected, we ask you to listen to this conversation with empathy and respect. We've linked resources in our show notes if you or someone you know is looking for help. This week's guest is a former Miss USA, Sports Illustrated swimsuit model, actress, activist, wife, and survivor. In this episode, we dive into pageantry, mental health, eating disorder awareness, sexual assault, testifying in court, healing, marriage, and motherhood. Her story is truly remarkable, and I'm in awe of her vulnerability and strength, and so honored to have her share her story on this platform. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the one and only Olivia Jordan. Welcome to the I Am More Than podcast, Olivia. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm so excited to be here.
I created one of those lists right when we launched the company of like people I wanted to have on the show. And you're one of them. So I'm so excited and so nervous for some reason. So I'm so excited because I remember seeing you for the first time with millions of other people on the Miss USA stage back in 2015. And I, like everyone else, was just captivated by you. I think that you have this presence about you, and following your journey ever since then, there's so much depth to you and you have such a story. So I'm really excited for our audience to get to know you.
Thank you. You're too kind.
Well, let's dive in about how you got started in pageantry, since that's where most of our mutual connections come from.
Yes. So I moved out to Los Angeles to pursue acting and modeling. And I was on all the casting websites, including like Casting Networks, which is just one of the big ones. And one day I was scrolling and there was this thing like, do you have confidence? Do you have stage presence? Like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, like, I think so. Like, I was like, all of that sounds good. And it was actually a like recruiting casting notice for Miss California USA. So I kind of like clicked on it and submitted, and I ended up at this recruiting seminar in Santa Monica with this pageant coach, Kristen Bradford. And I just like was instantly obsessed. It was a world that I had always admired from afar. Like I, of course, had watched Miss USA and Miss America growing up on TV. And I was like aware of these people, but I never thought that it was something I could pursue. It just like so was not my world before that moment. And just being at that recruitment seminar and seeing all these videos of not just the national title holders, but the state title holders, I was like, dang, this is like, there's a lot of opportunities here. So yeah, I was totally hooked from there.
And how long ago was that?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. I think that was 2012.
Okay. So you moved out to LA to pursue modeling and acting from Oklahoma. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. I went to school in Boston. So I left Oklahoma about 15 years ago. Went to school in Boston for 4 years. I always knew I was going to end up in LA. So Boston was more just that I was really trying to focus on school. I knew if I went to school in Southern California, I would drop out. I was just not going to do it. So I'm glad I had that experience of the Northeast and got my education, and then could not wait to get out and move to LA. And
there's something addictive about LA. I totally get it.
It is, right?
Yeah, there really is. So then from the Miss California
seminar basically that you go to and you get this bug in your ear, then how do you end up back in Oklahoma to then compete for Miss USA?
Yes, I'm going to make that long story short in that Kristen encouraged me to sign up for local pageants so I could learn the system and get sponsorships, to get a better state gown and have a better, placement at state. So I did some local pageants. I ended up getting my first title, Miss Beverly Hills, USA.
Ooh.
I did
She's
not
fancy.
And then went on to California, got first runner up, got kind of recruited to compete in Miss World, ended up like in 2 weeks being crowned Miss United States, and then like prepping and going to Bali for Miss World for a month to represent the United States. It was like the most whirlwind, wild experience. And then after that, I kind of thought that I was like done. Like I was like, that's kind of like as big as you can go. Like Miss World.
That's huge.
Just competing there. But I just continued because then at that point I had so many pageant friends and so many people actively competing. I like got the bug again and was like, you know what? It wasn't right to compete in California because I was such an outsider and I really like didn't connect to being a Californian yet. I was so new. And so I just reached out to the Oklahoma director and was like, I want to compete in Oklahoma. And they were like, well, as long as you can prove, eligibility, then you're in. So I came back to Oklahoma and lived with my parents for a bit and competed in Oklahoma.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. It worked out. And it definitely worked as it was meant to, because I needed to learn all of the tools from all of those like 6 or 7 pageants I did before to be able to be at a level where I could really come through at not just state level, but at national level. I would not have been ready had I just like won Miss California and then like that. I never could have, that was not the time.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how things just work out the way that they should, where at the time you're like, oh, this feels like a roundabout way.
Yeah.
Then it's like, no, that's exactly how it should have happened.
Exactly. It definitely felt right representing my home state. And it feels good now being back here that I'm like, I don't know, in some ways I got to like make the state proud at a point in my life. And it's like a little sense of pride being back here and like being able to continue to bring awareness to Oklahoma and to this like little piece of the world, that one of these flyover states that people say there's a lot of good stuff happening here.
Yeah, there absolutely is. Well, you've made it very proud, because then you go on, you win Miss USA and I feel like that was just a launching pad for you, because ever since you've done so many other just incredible things, but I feel like you've done a really good job of just remaining true to who you are. Like I feel like that's able to shine through everything that you do, whether it's pageantry or modeling. You're just relatable and you're authentic in yourself. And I think that's beautiful.
Thank you so much. I definitely try. I really try for my own mental health. Like the closer I am to, myself and succeeding as me, rather than like trying to be something or trying to fit into a box, the happier I am. I feel like anytime that I try to do something that I think that I'm supposed to, or like dress the way that I think I'm supposed to or whatever, it feels off and it makes me not feel good about myself. So thank you for that. Beautiful.
Well, I love that you brought up mental health. That's such a huge part of this platform. And I love just normalizing the conversation around it, because I think it's something that should be brought up often. We should be checking in with one another. You should check in on your strong friends. You should have these conversations that I feel like the more and more people hear our podcast and hear these conversations, it empowers them to then talk to their girlfriends.
Yeah, I definitely, like in high school, I was in therapy and I was so ashamed about it. Like I didn't really tell my friends. I thought it was like some sort of failure on my part, that I couldn't like get myself out of depressive funks and that I couldn't manage my anxiety. And I think now, it's like 15 years later, you get such better perspective that I realized that was actually like a true signal of how strong I was, of how I knew that life could be better and I wanted it to be better. And so I was willing to do the uncomfortable thing of getting help. And I think, yeah, the more we normalize that for young people everywhere, that it's okay to need help. Most of us do. I mean, in
Mm-hmm.
some way or another, in some chapter or not. Like I'm someone that I actually continue to benefit from therapy. So it's something that's a through line in my life. But no matter how you use therapy or the support of your friends or a self-help group or whatever it is, it's just like recognizing that it's not a sign of failure if you need that. It's actually a sign of absolute strength.
It really is. And you had a lot of maturity to want to go into therapy at a young age too, because you knew that life could be better. I feel like that's a lot of wisdom for a young girl. Were you supported by your family to go into it? Did somebody put that bug in your ear? Just how did you really know that that was a step for you?
Yeah, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I was in Bath and Body Works and I was looking at the like stress relief line. And I remember asking the woman, like, does this actually work? And she was like, I mean, it can help. I'm sure you're getting it for your mom or something. And I was like, oh yeah, for my mom, the stress relief. And she was like, we had some young girls in here the other day that actually thought they needed the stress relief treatment. And they were like 12 years old. And I was looking at it for me. I did have severe anxiety. And that was the first time that I was like, is something wrong with me? Is it bad that I'm experiencing such levels of like stress and self doubt and that I don't know how to control it?
Yeah.
And so I went home to my mom and I asked if I could see a therapist. I don't know why that was in my head, maybe from film and television. I'm not sure exactly where I got that idea. But I felt like I needed to talk to someone and I didn't feel comfortable enough at that moment to speak candidly with my mom or anyone in my life. I just didn't, I wanted to be able to talk to like an outsider.
Yeah.
And she said, no, you can always talk to me. And so it wasn't until I was 16 and in the deep, deep depth of eating disorder that it was at a point where everyone knew something was going on with me. For a long time, I had been sort of like the perfect kid, like good grades, like do everything right, rule follower. And so no one saw on the outside how much I was suffering. And my eating disorder was like a signal. I think in some ways it was a cry for help. It was a lot of things, but in some ways it worked as a cry for help because there was no denying that there was something wrong with me. I looked very sick. And so at the point that I literally, one day I went out to Mexican food with my parents and I had told myself like, okay, eat half the plate. And if you eat half the plate, then like that will be okay. That won't be like too bad of a break if I eat like one enchilada and some rice. And I was so starving. I ate the entire plate and broke down crying.
Mm.
And I was like, I need help. I want help. I was like, I can't stop eating. That was literally what I said. And I was a restrictor. So it was such a like disalignment with reality that my parents were like, wow. And the next day my mom picked me up from school and took me immediately to a eating disorder specialist.
Wow.
So I felt like at the time it was almost like I was annoyed because I was like, no, I just want to see like a nutritionist or something to help me with my binge eating. But she was more in tune with what I needed at that point, and she was able to finally see like that other stuff was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like what so many of us do is from the outside, you pretend that everything is so fine, where on the inside, you're just crumbling. And it sounds like you started crumbling at a very young age. 8 and 9 is really young to have stress. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you just held that inside for so long that I'm sure that once you finally were able to just talk to someone else, I'm sure that felt like a release a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely, I instantly was drawn to therapy. And I didn't even find like the best therapist until many years later. It can kind of be a process, but just like for the first time, I felt like I could speak and say like my deep, dark secrets and not feel judged. I grew up in like a very, very conservative Christian environment in Oklahoma. And I really felt like I really internalized the messaging of like that we are all sinners. I really internalized that from a young age of like, I am a bad person. And so like anything that I did was this like reflection of like how bad I was. And I had a lot of shame around that. And like, even, like rebelling against my parents or talking back to them or kissing a boy, like to me, it was all these like further reflections of how bad I was. And I really needed to talk to someone sort of outside of, for me, and other people can find great support within their religious community. I'm not downing that. I'm just saying my experience. I needed to talk to someone that wasn't in my religious community so I could feel that safe space to be like, does it really make me bad if I kiss this boy? Or does it really make me bad if I, these questions? And I'm still doing the work to sort of unpack all that shame. But yeah, having an outside person for me was life-saving.
Huge. And it sounds like, even though your parents sound like wonderful people, that they wanted to be involved and they wanted to be in the know, it's really difficult to open up to people that are close to you when you don't really know what's going on or how to label it. Or it sounds like you felt like everything was a sin. So you didn't really want to confess a sin, which I think religious communities are interesting. That I grew up in a very conservative Christian household as well. But I think that there's, now being an adult, looking back on it, I can see the damage that can do to children without realizing that maybe some of the practices that are in place don't need to be as intense as they are. Is that something you've kind of been able to come to terms with now as an adult looking back? And what are some of your like self-reflections on that?
Yeah, I think it's like, for me, I'm on, I think, a lifelong healing journey that I sometimes just want to feel like, that I'm totally fixed. But even talking about this stuff, it brings up emotion and tears. And I think for me, that's part of my healing, is allowing myself to have feelings around the stuff that was hard. And I was so lucky. I have wonderful parents, but all parents, there's no perfect parent. I certainly won't be one. And we didn't have a relationship where we were able to have really authentic conversations. Now we've done a lot of work and we're able to have such deeper conversations, and there's sadness for all of us around the things that I internalized and held in my childhood that I didn't feel like I could share. That was not their fault at all. But it was my own experience on earth and my, own fears and stuff I was downloading, not just from them, like in a religious community. Like I was downloading things from my Sunday school teacher, from my camp counselor, from school. I went to a Catholic school. So I was downloading a lot that I wasn't sharing with them, that actually, like, we could talk about like, okay, like here are what some religions believe, but this isn't what we believe. This, like we could have had more spiritually nurturing conversations and come to more balance. But just the way I was downloading was creating a lot of toxicity around that. I'm still healing around it. I still, primarily, most of my friends practice Christianity. I see myself as more of a spiritual person. I believe in God, and I find so much that we can learn from religion. But I just, for me, I think just because of my past, it's so much easier for me to not live within like a framework and rule book. Like I just think that I'm able to have a deeper relationship with God if I talk to God personally, rather than like through these mediums.
Yeah, beautifully said. And instead of like fearing, almost, I feel like a lot of religion is based on fear, which I think if you're not raised in it, I think that's why a lot of people are scared of it when they do become adults and look from the outside in. Because there's a lot of fear-based
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so yeah, it's truly is. It's returning to love.
Yeah.
It's returning to me what faith and spirituality is all about. What God is to me now is love. And so it's reconnecting with that, because that is the highest power to me. And yeah, getting away from exactly what you're saying, getting away from the attachment to these fear sides that can be very
Damaging.
manipulative
Yeah.
and yeah, damaging to young people, especially, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've just always admired about you is I don't know the depths of your story, but I feel like what I have seen is how vocal you are about the healing process. And even in this conversation, you're talking about lifelong healing, which I think is one of the main things that connected me to you so much years ago. I remember reaching out to you and being like, you talking about healing is making me want to go through the journey of healing. And I don't even know you. That I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing about you. Do you feel like every time that you're talking about things that have happened in your past and opening up about stuff, does that help?
Yes. Yeah. So one of my things was, I mean, as I said, I was really scared to talk to my parents and even people in my community. I held so much in for so long, and it just bred more toxicity inside me. And I think like letting go has been the most freeing, healing part of growing up,
Yeah.
is that I allow myself to cry now. I used to hold it in. I used to like smile through it, and just like allowing myself that freedom to feel what I'm feeling. It actually helps things come out at appropriate times. Like as we're having this conversation and we're talking about important things and hard things, it's appropriate that I have like a shake in my voice, tears
Yes.
in my eyes. It used to be that I would really hold stuff in, and I would like burst out crying when I would like ask a question in math class. And it's like, it was so incongruent with what was going on that people would look at me like, wait, what is wrong with you? Because I was holding so much in that it would come out at inappropriate times with inappropriate people, with unsafe people, that I would cry or be angry or whatever. And now it's like, now that I allow it, it
Yeah.
is what it is. And I don't fight it so hard. I don't fight like, oh, I have to be on right now. I have to be smiling. I'm on camera. I'm whatever. Like I don't fight that as much. And that's a huge part of my healing.
That's huge. And
Yeah.
I think that's so cool that you talk about that, knowing what your life has been like for the last 7 years in the public eye, very much. That most people will put this like stone cold face on and suffer on the inside. And I think that one of your strengths and one of your superpowers is not doing that, that it's just being yourself and being authentic.
Yes. And I will say it's definitely a learning process. Like as Miss USA, I actually struggled a lot that year with waves of depression. I wasn't depressed that entire year, but I would go through sort of months that were so hard. And because I was like Miss USA, I did fall into the trap of like, I'm supposed to be so grateful and I'm so lucky, and so many people would kill to be in this job that I don't deserve help and support. And I like I don't know.
Interesting.
It was like a step back in some ways in my healing process, but it was a journey I had to go through. But yeah, there were some very, very dark moments, and really lonely times during that year. Partly because I think I felt like I've achieved this goal and I'm supposed to whatever X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
I think anytime I'm telling myself I'm supposed to be a certain way or do something, then I'm not connected to my true self anymore. So I fell into that trap a few times, but I do appreciate you, and I do aim to live authentically, and I succeed some days, and some chapters I don't.
Yep. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And you had talked about really going to therapy for the first time. I believe you said around 16.
Yeah.
Do you think that's when you came to a point in your life that you kind of confronted the things that had happened in your past and you were determined from that point on to start healing? Or what did that process look like for you?
I think it's come in waves through life. I haven't hit rock bottom once. I've hit rock bottom a dozen times. I think
Mhm.
I've like, I'll go through periods where I am really dedicated to self-love and self-care. And then there's times where I just feel like I'm doing great and everything's fine. And I'm going to focus on my career and I'm going to do this, this, and this. And I get into a state of like forgetting my toolbox and, forgetting to meditate and see a therapist, and talk to my friends that you can really have those vulnerable, real conversations with. And I get into this state and I then sort of crumble because that's not how I can function. I can't just like ignore my most basic needs.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been waves. I wish I could say I was like dedicated from age 16 forward, but I think I've been on the path. I
Yeah.
think just sometimes I like take detours and then I get back on the path.
Yep.
It's a
Yep.
long route. Go through some
You go the
hedges,
scenic
weeds.
route.
Yeah.
And you never fully get to the destination, because I think that that's the thing with everything is when you're trying to confront any past traumas or any past experiences that are really difficult to navigate. I don't think that healing is ever a straight path.
Yeah.
And really anything, I don't think life is a straight path. I think you always are going to go around and around. And I don't know that you ever fully arrive
Yes.
somewhere.
Yes. The arrival was coming up when you were saying that. I
Yeah.
think there's what they say is like the myth of arrival.
Yeah.
Like we all, or I have felt forever like, okay, if I just do this, or if I just achieve this, then I'm going to feel great, or then it's all going to come together. And
Yep.
it's just not true. There's no arrival. We keep learning, we keep growing, we keep digging deeper.
Yeah.
We reach that level of healing, and then we realize there's like a whole other layer below that, beneath that, under
Yep.
that we can now dive into. And it can be frustrating, I think.
Totally.
And I think maybe there's like some reason why we all perpetuate this myth of arrival, because you want to believe like, okay, if I do this, then I'm going to get this, or
Yep.
feel like this. But unfortunately, I think it's just we're on a lifelong journey and there's no destination. We just
the
keep
hardest part.
going. We just keep like moving towards this light and love, and eventually we jump into it, and that's the next chapter, whatever that is.
Yep. You're so right. You're so right. And it can be so frustrating. It can be liberating. It can be so many emotions.
Totally.
That I feel you so deeply on that. Now, are you comfortable sharing some of the things that were happening throughout your childhood that I know you said were just kind of internalizing and becoming toxic inside of you? Just since our audience is mostly female, and I think that there's some sensitive topics that you and I have discussed behind closed doors that I think it's hard to talk about. But with the month that this episode will be released, I really think it's important to just vocalize things. So whatever you're comfortable sharing, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah. I am a survivor of sexual assault, and that has been a huge part of, I guess, why I talk about healing, has been recovering from that, and also forgiving myself, which maybe sounds odd to some people, but I have unfortunately been through a couple instances in my life, but one of the most profound, because it's the strongest memory, was when I was raped in high school by a friend of mine. And at that event, I had been drinking. I went into a room with him. And then, of course, I, said no, and a million other things happened. But for some reason, after that event, I really hung on to the parts that I had done wrong. Like, oh, that was naive to go into a room with a boy. And like, that was dumb. I shouldn't have been drinking underage. I shouldn't have been drinking that to that extent. All of these things that I held on to. And even he was a smart perpetrator in that he also shamed me. And he literally said, don't ever tell anyone about this. If you tell anyone about this, it's going to reflect badly on you. You're going to look bad. And I believed him. And it was a really good manipulation tactic on his point, because obviously he was scared of me telling anyone for fear of what would happen to him. And he projected that onto me, and I took it. And so for a long, long time, I really blamed myself. I was like deeply wounded from what had happened. I had a whole different outlook on the world of just like living in a lot of fear, of always looking over my shoulder, of also sort of sort of like counterintuitively of recreating instances where through like high school and college, I would sometimes even fake being drunk or get drunk and make out with a boy and go into a room with them and almost like see like, are they going to attack me? Is this going to happen again? And I don't recommend that obviously as any form of healing. It was like I don't know. It was like
it
something
sounds like
that
you were
I was
trying to see if you could
make
trust
sense.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And thankfully, luckily, I wasn't attacked again. And it did start to imprint like, oh, maybe it wasn't me. Maybe it wasn't drinking. Maybe it wasn't going into a room with a boy. Maybe it wasn't consenting to kissing, which I had done. Because every other situation that I had, when I said no, or when I physically pushed away, or what have you, when I made it a clear indication, no other boy or man that I have been with in my life has ever continued.
Yeah.
And so it's not an experiment again that I'm recommending, but it was something that I was like trying to make sense of it. And so it took a long time, I think, for me to start to realize like, wow, what happened to me shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And that's not, yes, like if I hadn't have gone to that party or if I hadn't have had that much alcohol or whatever, then that night wouldn't have happened. But also like most of all, if he wouldn't have been an assaulter, that wouldn't have happened.
Exactly.
If he would have listened to know, if he would have seen me as a human being instead of as an object, then that wouldn't have happened. And so I think reshifting my focus away from the self-blame, that is such a misrepresentation in our society. And I think it happens all the time. Like, oh, what were you wearing? Or what were you doing? Or what were you drinking? And I think the woman that was attacked at Stanford, quote in the book that she wrote, and the sentiment was the punishment for drinking too much should be a hangover, not an assault. And I think that resonated with me so deeply that like, yeah, why is it that for so many boys and men that experiment with alcohol at, these young ages of drinking too much or whatever, that for them, they just get hangovers, and that so many women I know get assaulted. And then we're told, whether directly or indirectly through friends and media and whatever else, like, well, you shouldn't have been drinking. Well, yeah, but like I deserved the headache. I deserved maybe puking in a toilet, but I didn't deserve to be attacked and have my entire life changed. So that's something I resonate with. And it took me a long time to get there. And it wasn't until I was turning 30. So it was almost 12 years after the attack that I was getting married and I was starting to think about having a family. And they were going through the Brett Kavanaugh trial at that time. And Christine Ford, at that time, she was giving her testimony, and there was so much backlash saying, like, if this happened, why didn't she or her parents report it? And what had happened to me happened. And my parents actually did know about it several months after I had confided in a teacher. The teacher helped me tell my parents, and we still didn't report it, even though it was a crime, even though
It happened.
it happened. But reading that tweet that went out, and so many people sort of condemning her in that way, I was like, well, dang, I didn't report it. And I kind of made a list of all the reasons I didn't. I was in denial. I didn't want my life to change. It was my senior year of high school, and I just wanted to have a normal senior experience. I didn't want people to judge me. I didn't want to get in trouble with my school because my school had a strict drinking policy. And if this came out, then I would have to be upfront that I had been drinking, and would I get in trouble? And like, I had this long, long list, and I looked at it at 29 years old, and I was like, well, none of that's true now. That was all real and valid. And it makes sense that,
Totally
teenage me was not ready to share this, but that's not true anymore. And so I had a session with my therapist, and then called my friend that's an attorney in Oklahoma. And I said, what are my rights? I don't need, I don't need him to go to jail. I just need him to know that he did something wrong. I don't know what his life has been since then, but like, what if he is up for Supreme Court? What if he's working in a school? What if he's doing all of these things? Like, I have no idea if he's continuing to assault other women. And if I am now at this point, like, allowing his behavior to go unchecked. And so the attorney was like, I'm going to call you right back. And she called me back and said, the statute of limitation in Oklahoma is 12 years. So I had 7 weeks to bring charges against him at that point. And that meant that I needed to get a police report in immediately because the police obviously have to gather evidence. And so I reported what had happened to the police. I had to recount the whole story of everything that I had been through. They challenged things that I said and tried to find like incongruent things of what had happened, or try to find like holes in my memory, which included things like, I was like, and then he picked me up, and they were like, well, how did he pick you up? Like, in what? And I was like, yeah, crazily, like, I don't remember. Like, I just remember literally the feeling of being off the ground. Like, I don't know. Did he put me over his shoulder? Like, I literally don't know. And I, at the time, was like, oh my gosh, I've ruined the whole case. Like, how can you not remember? How can you remember being picked up and not how? But thankfully that actually doesn't work against you. Being authentic and sharing exactly what you remember is what matters. And it took several months. All in all, they were able to arrest him. And then several months after that, he did plead guilty. And I got the opportunity to face him in court and read a victim impact statement of how he had changed my life, and look him in the face and recognize that he no longer had power over me. And it was truly like the most liberating feeling. It was horrible at the time. It was all those months of waiting were really high stress. I kind of like was reliving things all over again. And I understand even more. I have even more compassion for people that choose not to report or go public with what's going on, because it's a lot. And it was very challenging for my mental health. And at that point in my life, unlike when I was a teenager, I had a lot of tools in place. I had a really good community. I had a supportive fiance. I had so much support, and it still was hard. One of the most challenging chapters of my life. So I understand that it's not for everyone, but it was the most imperative part of my own personal healing journey to face him and take my power back.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
You're incredible. I hope you know that. I relate to so much of your story, and this community is something that too many people are a part of. And I really resonate with what you said, that the worst thing that guys get after experimenting with drinking is a hangover. And I think that one of the reasons why so many people are a part of this community surrounding situations like that is because no one talks about it. There's a lot of shame involved. And I think that everything that you were saying, even coming from a 29-year-old perspective and saying things that you know to be true, when you're questioned, when you're challenged, when you're treated not like a human, but like a case.
Yeah.
It makes sense as to why a lot of people would hide away from pursuing that. And I really respect that you put yourself through that process to help with healing.
Thank you. Yeah. It's obviously, it's such a personal decision to go through. And I just recommend that anyone just trust your heart and your gut and do what's right for you, but just know that we all deserve healing. And anyone that's experienced any trauma, don't feel like you have to go through that alone. Don't feel like you have to walk that walk alone, because it's not part of the normal human experience. We're not meant to be used and abused. That is not part of why we're here.
Yep.
And when that happens, we need to get help. And there can be so many facets of doing that, of friends and family and therapists. And there's actually a lot of like survivor groups. I found community in jiu-jitsu in a class called Women Empowered. And so just finding a tribe of people that can support you in your healing and doing what you need to do. And even if it takes, 12 years to talk about it, or 15 or whatever, or 30, like Christine Ford, it's important to talk about it.
Yep.
And it doesn't go away on its own, unfortunately. And I don't say that to scare anyone, but I think for many years I kept thinking, well, it's just gonna go away. It's just gonna not hurt so much, and I'm gonna let go of this feeling of fearing, certain men, of not looking over my shoulder, of all of these things, and it didn't go away. It has gotten so much better since I walked the healing journey. And I even really weird things, like I used to get shivers, which I now know is an anxiety reaction, but I used to get shivers when I would have flashbacks, or a thing would pop into my head, or even when watching film or television, or even just weird things, like walking by a teenage girl that reminds me of me, or just
little triggers.
Things that are unexpected triggers, that I would get a physical shiver. And I just thought that's just something that's always going to be part of my life. I have not had that since the day I faced him. I have literally, and the freedom of that my body no longer involuntarily shakes when I see these things is so wild and bananas, and not something I just never thought that was going to go away. I thought I was going to carry that forever. And,
It's never too late to heal, which I think I thought for a long time that, like you were saying, the more time went on, the more it would almost just kind of go away and be numb. Yeah. But I think even with people coming out talking now, and this is another reason why it's so important that women are sharing their stories, because I think there's a lot of women that think oh, well, it was 10 years ago, it was 15 years ago, it was 50 years ago. I can't talk about it now. I don't want to be challenged. I don't want to relive it. I don't want any of that. Where I think that as a society, we need to really learn to just listen before we judge somebody. That I think it's really easy to judge somebody without knowing their story. And I also don't think that you need to know somebody's story to have empathy and compassion.
100%.
And it's really important to choose who you want to share your story with, especially when you're at very like sensitive, vulnerable places of healing yourself. Like you were saying, you were sharing with the wrong people.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that. It's very selective on who you choose to share with. But I do think it's important that we all just take a sense of like empathy and compassion towards others, because we never know.
Yeah. And I think I just want to like be honest that before this event happened to me, I had had other friends in similar situations of assault that they had come to me, and my reaction was like, well, like, why didn't you stop him? Or why didn't you fight back? Or why were you so drunk? Or why?
Yep.
And none of that is helpful. And it was so toxic. And I didn't recognize how toxic I was being, and that I was participating in this victim shaming and blaming. And of course, I didn't realize until I was on the other side of it how incredibly painful that is to a victim. And I mean, I can't go back and respond differently when people were coming to me with such sensitive things. But I can say, like, wherever you are on the side of healing, or if you ever have a friend that goes through these things, like, sit and listen. And the questions are not like, why did it happen? I feel like the better questions are like, how can I support you? And like, what can we do now? And what do you need? I think the whys can feel really, really blaming, no matter if your intention is just trying to understand, or I don't think people are coming from a bad place when they ask why, but it is shaming. And I very much was a participant in that. So I just want to be transparent, and that I didn't know until I knew.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have to learn that way, but I did. And so now I can just encourage people that luckily have not been on this side of it that you and I have. Yeah, to have empathy, and you don't have to know all the details to have empathy for someone else's journey and story and the pain that they've been through.
You're so right. And I wish I could like hug you in person.
I know.
Oh my God. This is the first time where I'm like, Zoom, dang.
Oh my gosh.
But you had done a post where you talked about the fact that light and darkness can live at the same time. And I think this wraps up so much of even what you were saying, that you're going into one of the most exciting chapters of your life. You're at 29, you were engaged, you were getting ready to be married, and having that. And I think that that's something that's important to talk about too, because with lows also come a lot of highs. And I think I always thought too, like there's a chapter for each. They can't live at the same time.
Yeah.
That I think that's a lot of wisdom that you were sharing. So I'd love to hear about some of the highs that were happening during that tough time.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting thing now in retrospect. So when we were going through all of that, we were literally planning the wedding at the exact same time that we're going through this trial, and the date of the court date kept getting pushed for various reasons. And we didn't know if it was going to interfere with the wedding. Like literally if it was going to be on the same weekend or whatever, like it would have been on a weekday, but if it was going to be the same, you just have no idea when dates keep moving. And so my parents and some other well-intended people in my life were like, let's move the wedding to spring of 2020, which now we all know what happened.
Thank God you didn't.
But I really connected with a few friends that encouraged me, like, it's okay for you to be going through this really hard stuff and also planning this very exciting, joyful moment in your life. Like, it's okay. You don't have to choose. You don't have to choose to just live in the dark and then like have this wedding be this other chapter. And now, of course, retrospect, hindsight's 2020.
Always.
But I'm so glad that I listened to those friends that encouraged me, like, just be in it and ride the wave of the good and the bad. And I'm actually really glad that I did, because the hard days were really hard. And it was kind of nice to just talk about flowers and bridesmaids dresses and whatever else. Like that was actually a total light within darkness. And then, and some things didn't go perfectly because I was in such a place of kind of anxiety. I didn't fully trust myself. So I think in maybe a more neutral state, it would have been easier to make decisions. It would have been like easier to pick out my wedding gown. It would have been easier. So there were things that happened that like, the wedding gown thing was kind of a nightmare. Like I could not decide. And then I decided, and then I had regrets and like just so many things. But I think I was just, looking back, that makes so much sense. Like I was going through emotional turmoil, and it was hard to trust myself in that time because of everything else happening.
Yeah.
So I think just recognizing that what my friends taught me and what our experience really was, that like, you don't have to choose bad or good. Like we can all live in these vessels of like imperfect bodies and imperfect lives. And we don't have to be all light. Like we can let the dark parts of ourselves live. Like we can be light and shadow. We can live in joy and experience sadness. And it can all be part of a beautiful human experience and a beautiful year. Yeah. And it can help us find balance and like really appreciate. My wedding day was truly the happiest day of my life. It was so joy-filled. It was so perfect once it came together and was happening, because I think I was in such a state of gratitude because I had also felt lows that year. And so I just was like, wow, this is it. To be surrounded in love and celebrating our love and making this commitment to this other human being, and what a dichotomy of like facing this man that had hurt me and silenced me, and now marrying a other man that does the exact opposite. He embraces me, he encourages my voice, he loves me, despite a lot of flaws. And I think that dichotomy as well, it was really interesting that not all people or men are bad. Like, I think that was actually like a good saving moment, that I didn't have to let one experience define my future, that I could have this very well-placed anger towards one person and love towards another.
Yeah.
And let it all live in harmony as part of the experience.
It's beautiful. And he sounds like a truly tremendous guy. You guys are so cute. You guys got married in 2019 or in the beginning of 2020? 2019?
November 2019.
Good timing.
Oh. When did you get married?
We just got engaged.
Oh my God. 3
months ago.
Oh my gosh.
We're brand new.
I'm like, I think of him as your husband. How funny. No, enjoy the fiance stage. That's so fun. You only get to say it for a little while.
I know. I'm going to milk it as much as I can. And I need to just pick your brain on your wedding, because your wedding is like the ultimate goals to me. Like, your wedding dresses.
Well, look how funny is that I'm literally like, I had doubts about my wedding dresses, and you're like, they're goals. So
I'm like, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. So
the stuff we get caught up on and like the stories we tell ourselves, for me, the wedding stuff was very attached to like this perfection, and like we can't attain perfection in any capacity.
In anything.
So that's my only tip for you, is like embrace all the pieces of your wedding. It's not going to be perfect. And that is what makes it beautiful. It's going to be you. It's going to be you and this person that love each other. Like that's the thing. It's not about the meals being right on time and all the photos going exactly as planned and the weather staying perfect. It's your love. That's what it is.
You're so right. I need to remind myself of that over and over and over again, because that's what it is.
It does.
I know, right? That's what I'm learning.
Yes.
But you guys are now entering a whole new chapter, that you're back in Oklahoma as of what, a month?
Yes. It's officially been a month. That's
my gosh. Congrats. You guys are homeowners.
Yes.
and really just embarking on this whole new chapter and creating life and so many exciting things.
It's, yeah, pretty wild. Definitely didn't think that this is where we'd be a year ago, but this is exactly where we're meant to be. I think you just keep like kind of riding the wave of life and going, does that feel good? I guess that's what we're going to do. So yeah, the pandemic kind of fast forwarded our timeline. I think I was very career focused before. And the pandemic just made me realize like life is short, man. Like do the things that bring you joy and that, serve the world. Like, I don't know. I was so like, I guess that perfectionism piece was up again, that I was like, well, I can't be a mom until I have like this, this level
These
of career,
accolades.
yeah,
Yep.
this amount of money in the bank account, this level of healing, like all of this stuff that it's like, I'm never going to arrive.
Exactly.
I'm going to keep learning and growing, and hopefully I can have a relationship with this tiny human that encourages them to understand that I'm a human being and I'm flawed, and that that they know that they can come to me with whatever they want to come to me with and their flaws.
Yeah.
Because we're the same. We're all figuring it out as we go.
Yep. You're so right. And back to never arriving in any area of our life, professionally, personally, motherhood, your relationship, everything. But you are going to make a tremendous mom. And I'm so excited for you. And just thank you for giving me so much of your time and sharing your heart and your story. I just love you. I appreciate you. You're incredible. Thank you.
I love you and appreciate you. And thank you for creating this program where you're just inspiring so many young people. I wish that I could have listened to someone like you when I was growing up to just normalize the human experience. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for doing that now and accepting me now.
Of course. Thank you. You're going to change a lot of lives with this episode.
How incredible is Olivia Jordan? I'm so thankful she shared her story with us, and I hope it made an impact on you. We've linked resources in our show notes if you or someone you know is looking for help. If you're a member of this community, I'm sorry. You're not alone, and we're here for you and so inspired by you. Please take a second to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast so we can continue bringing inspiring conversations like this one. Remember, you are so much more than. We'll see you next week.